Good evening and welcome to the June 7th, 2016 Salem City Council regular meeting. It will now come to order. We will have the invocation given by Steve Faber from the Parks Department, and please remain standing then for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your love for us and the way you demonstrate it to us each day. We're grateful for the gifts that you give to us. We're grateful for the citizens that we share this community with, and ask that you bless us as a community and you bless us as friends and neighbors. We pray that as we conduct business tonight, that it would be with your blessing, that it would be in a tone and a sense of unity that makes you proud of us. Father, thank you for all the gifts that you have. Thank you for blessing our community. Thank you for the love that you share with us and for always being our friend. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mrs. Dickey?
Here.
Mr. Gall?
Here.
Mr. Nestick?
Here.
Mr. Paparotis?
Here.
Mr. Whitehill?
Here.
Mr. Cushman? 6 members.
Mr. Paparotis.
A motion to excuse Councilman Cushman tonight.
Second on that, Mr. Whitehill. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mr. Nestick?
Yes.
Mr. Paparotis?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
All right, he is excused. Everybody's received a copy of the minutes of the May 17th, 2016 meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to those minutes? Seeing none, then we stand as approved. We have no petitions and remonstrances this evening, nor do we have receiving of any visitors. Therefore, we go ahead and move on to report of city officials. Mayor Berlin.
Thank you. I would like to remind everyone out there that we are having our Salem Super Cruise this week. It will start Thursday, although on Wednesday, I believe Essex 2 has a little mini cruise going on for the residents of their old folks' home. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, please come to downtown Salem. There's plenty of bands, food, lots of events going on. So come down and enjoy the hospitality here in Salem, Ohio.
Any questions?
Any questions for me?
Seeing none,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Law Director, Attorney Zellers.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to congratulate all the seniors that graduated this past 2 Sundays ago, I guess, and wish them the best of the luck in the future. In particular, I'd like to congratulate Olivia Stiff and her family, and also my son Kane for being the valedictorians this year. So very proud of him and happy for that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the Law Director? Mr. Gall.
Mr. President, during the Street Sideways, that's cute, Sideways Committee, it was a little bit of that at the time. We had tremendous interest in the report that was just delivered to us from Hals and Baird, showing that the sidewalks that need some help, an estimate that went from about $300,000 to $600,000. And the sidewalks then became a rather interesting question because the chairman happened to note to the audience of our city ordinance 521.06. It's titled, Duty to Keep Sidewalks and Repairing Clean. No owner or occupant of abutting lands shall fail to keep the sidewalks, curbs, or gutters in repair or free from snow, ice, or any nuisance. Whoever violates this section is guilty of a minor misdemeanor. Well, the question that was raised from about half the audience was, who enforces section 52106. And I had asked the law director to take a look at this ordinance because I have a real problem with making somebody that for some reason doesn't keep a sidewalk clearer becomes a criminal because of a minor misdemeanor criminal charge. And I asked the law director, is this something that we really look at criminally? If so, who in fact enforces it? And more importantly, we had at least 4 people ask our chairman, whom do we contact if we feel a sidewalk is not being repaired or replaced, or it is a nuisance? Who do they go to? Who do they see? Who do they talk to?
If I may, Mr. President.
Yes.
Mr. Gall, I did have an opportunity to look into this a little bit based on the email that you did send me. Ohio Revised Code 723.011, which is referenced in our particular code section, allows a municipality to enact an ordinance that would require adjacent landowners to keep the sidewalks, curbs, and gutters in repair, free from snow and any nuisance, and allows the municipality to set the penalties for failure to do so. When Salem enacted this ordinance, they chose to make it a minor misdemeanor, which is a criminal penalty, which would then require enforcement by our police agency at this point, absent some other specified enforcing agent, which would mean that it would be in the discretion of an officer to determine whether or not that sidewalk is in repair, free from snow or any nuisance. I would note, though, from some of the research that I did, the issue of the word repair versus replace, things of that nature, have always been an issue. And some municipalities have moved the enforcement of that, and specified other agencies to enforce that, such as maybe housing inspectors, building inspectors, really, in the municipalities that I looked at, so that it takes it out of the hands of the police officers, who probably don't have any better idea, absent some particular training, of whether or not a sidewalk is in repair or not in repair, which an owner may not know as well. 50101 K2 of our ordinances specifies enforcement. It lists all the different officers that we have in the city and what they, not in particular what they enforce, but that would allow us to move that enforcement away from the police department if council thought that was necessary, or change that ordinance, eliminate that ordinance, whatever council's decision would be about that. And that might take some pressure off the police department, unless the police department was going to work in conjunction perhaps with engineer's office or something like that, to be able to determine if a sidewalk is in need of repair. Does that help?
Mr. President,
Yes.
so when the people that came to our meeting said, who do they file complaint with? What is the answer to that?
The police department. And then remember, though, it would be, because it's a criminalized, it would now be officer discretion. So a citizen may feel that there's a problem with a particular piece of sidewalk. An officer could investigate that, and it may not feel the same way, in which case they wouldn't be required to write a ticket, depending on how they felt it was at that time.
Well, the wording that I even found more interesting was free from snow and ice, particularly in downtown Salem. We have had that conversation for years, and that you'll walk down the street and 3 of the buildings are clear of ice. The next building obviously has no attention to it, and then
Right.
you have all the issues that go with that. The other item I understood, and I looked at the Ohio Revised Code, it's my understanding that if, for example, streets, alleys, and sidewalks decide to take a look at repairing the sidewalks that are listed in that survey we just got, there is actually the opportunity to have the city, at its expense, repair and replace the sidewalks, which we did in the beautification years ago and put the bricks in. But then in turn, the city then is allowed to assess the landlord for the cost of doing that. And in fact, if I remember correctly, I think I paid 5 years' worth of assessments to pay for the bricks and so on. But I guess what I'm asking is under your opinion, is this an ordinance that we should keep as a criminal matter, or should rules and ordinance take a look at this and see if this isn't something that maybe even necessarily fines or whatever, assessments, fines, whatever alternatives that were allowed under the Ohio Revised Code? I just have a real problem with this being a criminal issue. And it puts the burden, as you said, on the police department, and should be the least of their problems on trying to decide whether or not the crack that's in a sidewalk is a nuisance and needs repaired. They have enough other problems to do. I'm just asking if you feel it's something the rules and ordinance should look at.
And I do think, Mr. Gall, again, the revised code 723.011, I don't have it in front of me, I made some notes the other
Sure.
day, but it does allow a municipality, I believe the language is to set penalties associated with these issues. It doesn't say criminal penalties, so that could be penalties, I believe, however, the city would see most appropriate.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I got a couple of questions for Mr. Zeller. I'll keep as brief as I can, though, but it was stated in the paper a while back that the $2.7 million and the $500,000 of our regular paving project, yearly project fund, were combined in a total. At my last meeting, I asked Mrs. Brothers regarding this combined fund, and she said they were both listed as a separate item. That I understand, but the totals are combined at the bottom. I asked her out of which fund the money paid to Howes and Baird for the contract came out of. She said half was taken out of each. My question is this. On the ballot, in any ordinance that we passed, resolution we passed, it stated that the money in that was being taken for that 0.25% was strictly for paving. It said nothing about a contract. I strongly feel that the amount of the contract should come out of the $500,000 of the regular fund. Am I wrong in looking at it this way?
Well,
I don't want to lie to the voters.
certainly, Mr. Brown, are you wrong to feel that way? I'm not sure I can tell you how to feel, sir, but without having all those facts in front of me, I'm not sure I could render you a good opinion here on this short notice. I'm sure Ms. Brothers is well aware of what she's doing, and we always have the state auditor's office looking over our shoulder on all these issues to make sure that it's happening in an appropriate manner.
I'm just trying to be accountable for every dollar.
Certainly.
And we promised the people what it was for. But
Let me ask one question. Mr. Gall, you had submitted, I think, what you had for Mr. Zellers and the questions ahead of time and gave him an opportunity to research those, is that correct?
I did, sir.
Okay. Mr. Brown, I just would suggest, just for expediency and maybe to help things along in the future, maybe submit this stuff.
I think so.
It's harder for him to just come up with an answer off the top of his head a lot of times.
Maybe we can address that for next year later on. The other question I have is Pershing Street Extension. We came up with money to pave the street, put in curbs, and put in sidewalk on the south side. And Zalevi had given us permission to do that. Now, who is responsible for that sidewalk and that curb maintenance, since it is on Zalevi's property? Is the city responsible for that, or is it Zalevi's?
Again, Mr. Brown, I don't recall if there was a
I come
written
up with some good ones, don't I?
agreement or something of that nature. There may be an agreement that specifies those things. I'm not aware.
I only have one other question. Excuse me for being a little slow here today. The city has installed some sidewalks, especially up past the community center and up past some of those neighborhoods, and make it look nice up there for the original construction. My question is, they were put in for free with that grant or whatever it was and so forth, but so how can we ask other people to pay to repair or put in a new sidewalk when we did those for free for other people?
And Mr. Brown, I think that's an excellent question. I'm not sure I can answer it for you. I think the
Could you try
city
to
has
find
the
answers for
option,
me?
the city has the option to do,
Just try to
to
find
replace
answers for
those
the next
things.
meeting, I'd appreciate it, but these are things people ask me.
certainly.
I don't pull these out of the woodwork.
Well, they asked me too. They read the paper and they asked me the
Thank
same.
you very much.
I think on that, those grant monies that are applied for specific areas, and it has to do with economics of the area, and that's how they qualify for those grants.
North Ellsworth? that section is an economically harmed area.
I'm just telling you how it's normally done.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other questions for the law director? Seeing none. Auditor, Mrs. Brothers.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of council. Last meeting, Mr. Kens had mentioned that we had an anonymous donor to pay for us to have a final leaf pickup, which we had last Saturday. It took 5 hours per person, so it took 40 hours for that to be done. And it was paid already by the anonymous donor, and with a little urging, I was given permission to give the name. And we want to thank Mr. Gall for his generous donation for the city of Salem to get those streets cleaned up. And the other item I have is that we have fireworks in 3 weeks and 5 days on July 3rd, which happens to be on the same night that we have the Quaker Band doing a concert. So it'd be a great night. But I just want to mention that we are short $2,400 for our fireworks this year. So I just want to get that out. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than glad to answer.
One question I would have with, if somebody wanted to make a donation with regards to that, how would that be made out to?
They could just make it to the city of Salem and send it to the mayor's office
And specify.
and fireworks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Gall.
And if you're the wrong person I should direct this question to, please tell me. I'm looking at the Columbiana County Local Government Alternate Formula Distribution for 2017. May I ask if you're familiar with that formula?
Yes, and what I can't answer then Mr. Zellis would, because at one time when East Liverpool was the largest city, they were receiving, 80 to 85% of the LGF. So Mr. Zellis and Mr. Armini actually went down to Columbus so we could have this changed so it's fairer to everybody, all the communities in the Columbiana County. So I'm sure I didn't do that much justice, Mr. Zellis, if you'd like to.
I think you nailed it, Mrs. Brothers.
But that's what it was. They went down to Columbus to ask to have the formula of LGF changed, so every municipality and township would get a share of, more of a share of the LGF than what was prior to.
Then let me ask, I'm going through the distribution that you set out. So we have a pot of money coming from the state, and 50% of it immediately goes to the county general fund,
Yes.
okay? Then an equal amount of $15,000 per year to be allocated to each subdivision. Now, here's my issue. It says including the county park district. Now, you have a county receiving most of the sales tax. You have the county receiving the casino money. You have the county with a very large budget balance in its general fund. And yet, the other subdivisions and municipalities are being asked to take $15,000 out of their balance to include the county park district. I don't understand that a county park district is a subdivision of the county that shouldn't be. The funds for the county park, in my opinion, should certainly come out of the county general fund. That's their half. They've got half, they've got all the casino money, they've got the sales tax money, they've got a large balance, and yet we're being asked that out of our half of the money that we're being given to the county park department. Do you know how long the county park department has been allocated this additional $15,000?
Ever since this has been changed, I don't know exact year, Mr. Zellis.
I can't recall myself, if I may, Mr. President. And Mr. Gall, maybe this helps, but at the time that the municipalities got together after the modification of the law and developed this formula initially, the county park district is a qualifying subdivision. I don't think it's required to be included, but it's one that can be. And that was one of the agreements that was reached however many years ago that was, 12 years ago or something of that nature. So it's been included, is my understanding, all the way back, based upon the agreement of all those subdivisions that collectively put this formula in place. And the reason.
Mr. Zellers, I'm sorry, but this is obviously when there wasn't much funding available.
Sure.
The county had a real problem even balancing its own budget. But we have, when I say we, we're looking at the other subdivisions, have not discussed this formula ever since the county's got the casino money, the sales tax money. We haven't gone back and discussed this.
I don't believe so, Mr. Goen. It could happen. I guess we could have a collective meeting again of the subdivisions. For all the years since this went into place, and we weren't always the largest subdivision we are now, but we would disseminate a letter reminding everybody that this legislation needed passed. I think in the beginning, we would also say, if anybody feels that we need to meet again, then perhaps we should do that.
But we would have the option to do that. We can sit down with the other divisions and say, hey,
Yes.
there is a big difference in the county funding now as opposed to it was when this was originally formulated.
We certainly could, and I think if the other, probably a majority of the other subdivisions agreed with that, then we could perhaps change the formula to reduce or eliminate the county park district. But I don't know how the park district is funded, if it would come through the 50% from the county. They've always received 50%, by the way, even before the law changed. The county got the first 50%. And the rest was divvied up in a very inequitable formula previously. The largest municipality, which was East Liverpool for all those years, took the vast lion's share. It was close to 80%, and we divided up the rest. The reason this was put in this way at the 15,000 is some of the smaller subdivisions, the townships.
They get a minimum.
They were getting almost nothing, yeah, so,
Thank you, sir.
yeah.
Any other questions for Mrs. Brothers?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Safety Service Director, Mr. Kenst.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mayor Berlin, and members of council. Just a quick answer to Mr. Brown's question. On North Ellsworth, that sidewalk that was put in by the property owner, not the city. The same is true in the development on Westview. That whole development, he put in not only the sidewalk, but he paid to have the street put in. So, like I said, since I've been here, we haven't had any grants for sidewalks, and so all the development has been done by the property owner. But just kind of along those lines, as you've noticed, our paving project is well underway this week. They're moving right through town. They're doing a lot of grinding. I haven't been up there, but I understand we have a couple of streets already paved. They're going to avoid the downtown area with the crews for this weekend, but they are not giving up. They're going to work in the outlying areas. So we just ask everybody to be patient. There are no street closings, just delays, so we're going to get through it. It's going to be well worth the effort. Next item I have, if you haven't had a chance, I'd encourage you to drive down Franklin, west of South Lincoln, to see where the three houses were where we had the fire. They are all demoed by now. They're all just dirt. It looks 100% better. So that was done this week as well. So really, hopefully that'll help the neighbors. And my final thing, I don't know if it was the last meeting or the meeting before last, we had the recommendation to have the American flags put on the overpass streetlight poles. That project moved very quickly. We have a fabricator, we have the flags. We're trying, the request was to have it done up, have them up by Flag Day. We thought that was pretty aggressive, but I said if we could do that, let's try to have them up for the cruise. I talked to, well, anyhow, what happened is Ohio Edison moved this through their bureaucracy very quickly. They approved the brackets. Hickey Fabricating is making the brackets now. They will not be done until Monday at least, so we won't have them for the cruise, but hopefully for Flag Day. And just today, I received a 6-page agreement from Ohio Edison to have them put on their poles, which I just directed to Mr. Zellers today, so he hasn't had a chance to respond. I don't know what we have to do as a city to get this done. I mean, Ohio Edison's fine with it, but it's just a requirement that they have on their project. But without any kind of luck, we're gonna have them up next week, or if not, everything is in place to have them put up. And we already said, the city is going to, the only cost to the city is having our street department install them. And that's it. Any other questions?
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I have a couple comments and a couple questions. I do want to thank Mr. Kenstick for attending my meeting on May 31st. You did make a comment at that meeting that I'm still a little bit perplexed about. I'm not quite sure what's going on, but if I heard you correctly, you said the time is getting short and that my committee better start working now on the 2017 street paving program. I know you had a lot of comments. However, I wasn't hearing too well that night again, but would you explain to the people here what you meant by that comment?
Well, my comment was that's a long process. You know, if you're gonna do the RFQs for the engineers, if you're going to evaluate those, and then if you're gonna go out to bid, you have to have this done by the end of this year. You can't have that done next spring, or you won't have a paving project.
No, what you're doing, you're tossing this back into the committee's lap, the whole project?
Yes.
I don't think you can do that. We were willing to give insight and take information from people, but you can't throw that in the hand of a committee of Salem City Council. You don't have that authority. Only council has that authority, sir. Only council. I suggest we work together to get things going, and I'll do everything I can to work with you, as I've tried in the past, but we've been knocking heads, and we gotta stop knocking heads. But I think overall, you and the mayor have done a fine job. I think you've done a very fine job. It's not our job to sit down and do all this. However, I think we could do a good job, this committee. If that's what council wants, I think we could do a good job. But we'll need your assistance, because you guys have been around a while. But it isn't our responsibility. We provide the funding. You come up with the program. But it's got to be done by the rules. That's why we're here. That's why this committee is assigned to oversee, so to speak, to be accountable. When they said the word accountable to me, when I first took this committee, I was told I would be accountable for the money, and I assumed I meant everything in the process of getting this job done. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I was responsible, my committee. We are. Now, the other question I have is this. I'll keep it very brief and very quickly. Also at that meeting, Mr. Gall suggested that maybe the city should follow what the Utilities Department did recently to pre-qualify engineering firms. We all kind of agreed on that. We thought it was a great idea, Mr. Gall, and I think it's something we need to look to as a city. But however, I was kind of surprised when I read in the newspaper the next day that the reporter came up to you and asked you what you thought of doing this. And your comment, she said, what do you think about doing this, or something to that respect? And your comment was, I would say yes, due to the way we were interrogated by the questions raised by Mr. Brown about the process we followed to select an engineer for the paving contract, a process that followed the Ohio Revised Code. I never said you didn't follow the revised code. What I said was, there's things in there that I think should be adjusted to fit all contractors. I never said you didn't follow the course. What I did say was this, in my questioning, I felt that you and Mrs. Brothers improperly filled out the evaluation forms. I don't think you did it to the full extent of your ability because of the way they were answered. How can you give somebody 1 point for poor performance in the city when they never worked here before? I don't want to get into that. It's all in the newspapers. They all get
Mr.
around
Brown,
it.
is there a question here?
Yes, there
are
is
you
a
just
question. I have a
talking?
question, sir. I'll make it right now.
Please ask it.
Are we going to go through this again next time?
No, because
Thank you,
you're
sir.
going to do the RFQs.
Thank you, sir. We'll work well together. Thank you.
Well, I wonder about that, Mr. Brown.
I hope so. I hope so.
Mr. Nestic?
Hey, Ken, Broadway and Pershing look great now with the paint and the asphalt. I was driving down there and I was just wondering, you know, whose responsibility is it, or how do we get the curbs painted also? Because there's a lot of places where there was yellow paint on the curbs, it's kind of worn off and tires are rubbed against it and everything, but what's it take to do that?
Yeah, excuse me. The electrician, I think he puts that on the traffic and safety person. It's his job list, and That'll be probably as this summer painting
It's
comes
not the
along.
building owners don't have to do that
No.
or anything? Okay,
No,
so it's
we-
something we do?
Yes.
Will we be doing it?
Yeah, he has some guidelines, and I don't know what those are offhand, but the ones that need it will get done.
Because it'd look great if it was all done at the same time with the
Yep.
new paint on the stripes in the street and all that. And I just want to comment too, that although I am glad you're willing to take on accountability for the whole council, but we're all accountable to the voters,
That's
okay?
what I defined. That's what I meant to say. We all make decisions together,
So
sometimes.
anyhow,
Anything else?
No,
Mr.
that's it.
Lustig?
Thank you, sir.
I'll make a comment.
Mr. White?
If I may briefly, I do want to say that just as another council member, I have concerns with the idea of taking administrative tasks and putting them onto a council committee, so I want to make sure that's said publicly. This isn't a situation where you say, I don't like the pizza, so go make it yourself next time. I shuddered and cringed at some of the questions that Mr. Brown asked, and I felt like it did become an interrogation. However, I don't know that that gives the right to just say, from now on, you do it if you don't like how I do it. I do think that there has to be some common ground on that one, so let me just make sure that gets said.
May I reply to that, sir?
Go ahead briefly, please.
That would be very briefly. My mother once told me, I can't learn anything unless I ask questions to get answers. I asked questions and I got improper answers that night. I didn't get complete answers. It's unfortunate that people of Salem, the newspaper didn't report everything that happened that night. They kind of cut it off a little short. Had they been, people would have been asking questions about what happened that night. The thing in a nutshell is, I can't do anything unless I have answers. And this has to be done by the rules. It wasn't done quite by the rules. It will be done next year. We'll be organized over in my part here, well organized. We'll have a program set up to follow everything and make sure that everything is perfect.
Let me make a
Fine.
comment with regards to that.
Thank you.
For anybody up here to say something's done by the rules or not done by the rules is strictly their opinion.
That's right.
It's based in no fact. It's just a person stating what they think. If somebody feels that they were interrogated, they have the right to say that also. Enough with this issue.
Thank you, sir.
Utilities, Mr. Weingart.
Mr. Chairman, I have no formal report, but to report that the council has, or Utilities Commission has changed their date for the June meeting to June 16th at 4 p.m. to accommodate the cruise.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weingart. Any questions for Mr. Weingart?
I have one of Mr. Weingart.
Mr. Gall?
Mr. Weingart, what does the date June 1st, 1952 bring to mind, sir?
Well, I just had a call from a former councilman, a former Utilities Commission member, that was my anniversary. But they were off one day, I think it was June 2nd.
June 2nd. And if my math is correct, you have completed 64 years of service to this city? You get a standing ovation next year.
That was great.
All right, Parks Director, Mr. Faber. Mrs. Dickey.
Could you update us on the project that you're doing out there behind Sunset for the dog park? Well, not you're doing, but it's happening.
President, Mayor Berlin, members of council. It's a project, it's an Eagle Scout project. The fencing is being installed. I think the fencing is done, but the gates are still yet to come. Benches have been installed. There are some other amenities that are coming, but I'm not privy to all of that stuff just yet. Again, it's an Eagle Scout project. It's not a project that we're controlling.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Faber? Seeing none, thank you. Council Clerk, Mrs. Bricker. That concludes the report of city officials. Move on to report of standing committees. Is there any report from finance, Mr. Whitehill?
There is not, however, I do have two ordinances for tonight.
All right.
Or actually, one resolution and one ordinance.
The resolution will be number 30. That's dealing with the alternative method of apportionment of local government funds.
Thank you.
And then the ordinance will be number 31, and that is authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to advertise bids for a vehicle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Streets, alleys, and sidewalks, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President. The streets and alleys, excuse me, streets, alleys, and sidewalks can be met on 31 May. I've already made comments about some things that happened at that meeting, so I'm going to kind of cut back on it a little bit here, but the meeting was called to order at 6 o'clock by myself. Committee member Mr. Gall was president, Mr. Paparotis was excused, the city auditor Betty Brothers, and service director Mr. Kentz were present and actively participated in the meeting, and I appreciate that. Many people from the city were there, including Karen Carter, Jennifer Brown, Audrey Knoll, Elizabeth Thatcher, Scott Cahill, Jack Cothera, Mayor John Berlin, and others. We opened the meeting by stating that I was aware of the advisory board that had been appointed, and I think it's going to be a great thing, and it's going to be a great help to this committee over the period of this year and other years of the paving program. I welcome that idea. Let me, just a minute, please. And we understand a recommendation will be brought to our committee, which we'll take very easily. This I can skip. I told Mr. Kentz that I thought the street department was doing a fantastic job and was appreciated by the citizens. I asked him to inform them about the meeting that was held for the contract, and he said it went the same as usual, the paving contract. Former Councilwoman Elizabeth Thatcher expressed her concern for the alley beside her home on South Lincoln and the condition of sidewalk in general. Those items will be looked at. Mrs. Karen Carter asked a month ago for the downtown sidewalk project to be discussed by this committee. Chapters include section 521.06 of the Ohio Revised Code of the, as was read by myself. I won't read it at all, but we all know what it says. Mrs. Carter had questions regarding the project. Some were directed to Mr. Kentz, which he did a very nice job at answering. Mr. Scott Cahill spoke about his concerns for the sidewalks and what he does as a property owner to follow the laws. Downtown building owners take responsibility. He stated it all comes down to enforcing the laws, and even if that has to be done, and that's what I've said, enforcing the laws that exist. We don't need to amend or change a lot of them, just enforce them. The committee was asked who enforces those laws, and we talked about that. I assured those present that additional meetings would be scheduled to address the 2016 street paving project and the downtown sidewalk plan. I would like to add on that, the rest I've already covered, I'd like to add on that the project book that was done by Howes and Barrett is just for downtown sidewalks. It didn't include any sidewalks outside. It included between Pershing and 2nd Street, I believe. But that's what was in the project. That pretty much summarizes my report. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Very good, thank you. Utilities, Mr. Gall.
Utilities has not met since the last meeting of City Council. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Traffic and safety, Mr. Whitehill.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee did meet to discuss the maximum hiring age of the fire department. However, I do not have the minutes prepared for tonight, so I will bring them to the next meeting. That will be previous to the legislation being brought before council.
Very good. Rules and ordinances, Mrs. Dickey.
Rules and Ordinance Committee has not met, so I have no report tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Parks, Mr. Paparotis. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Brown.
Due to the questions we've been having and the problems we've been looking at on 521.06.06, maybe we should have a rules and ordinance to discuss that. The reason I'm suggesting that is because it doesn't say, it says they have to repair them, but it doesn't say what they have to do. And what we need is conformity. If one guy's gonna put concrete down and somebody else is gonna put down gravel, we don't have conformity, but maybe you wanna consider calling a meeting.
Well, it's my opinion that that is a streets, alleys, and sidewalks issue, and you can bring an ordinance out of that committee.
I'm fully aware of that, but I thought maybe you would.
We have a lot on the agenda when we
Well,
start
two of us
meetings
are on that
again.
committee anyway, myself and Mr. Gall, but your presence would be nice too, and Mr. Paparotis. Maybe we could have a combined meeting, we'll talk about it in the future.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Parks, Mr. Paparotis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have a report. June Parks Commission meeting is on Wednesday, June 22nd at 6 p.m. on the ground floor of the Memorial Building. Also, City Lake was open for fishing and boat rentals Tuesday through Sunday. And we hope that everyone gets a chance to come out to the lake, and if not, just enjoy the view. Resurfacing of the basketball courts in Centennial Park has been completed. The recoating of the tennis courts in Centennial Park has been completed as well. Mr. Favor's working on getting the fencing replaced at the basketball courts. Fencing at the tennis courts is in good condition, does not need repair. Salem Parks and Salem Public Library program called Go Wild in the Parks continues tomorrow, June 8th through 6:30, and will be a program on stream sampling. This will be held at Eagleton Glen Recreational Area, also known as the Covered Bridge off of Tea Garden Road. On June 22nd at 6:30, you can take a walk through Waterworth Memorial Park and explore, find and smell the many wildflowers the park has to offer, while Rachel, a naturalist from Beaver Creek State Park, leads the way through the nature trail. That's my report.
Thank you. Economic Development, Mr. Nestic.
Thank you. The Economic Development Committee did not meet. I do not have a report.
Committee of the Whole, Mr. Nestic.
The Committee of the Whole met on the 24th of May. I do not have minutes for that at this time, but the topic was the garbage pickup and the city going with a single trash hauler that would include curbside pickup. Everybody expressed their opinion. It was discussed at length. No action was taken, and no action is currently planned. That's a summary of that meeting.
All right, thank you. That concludes the report of committees. Move on then to second and third reading of ordinances and resolutions. Attorney Zellers, we had ordinance number 26 that was scheduled to be given a third reading this evening. It's my understanding that it needs to go to...
Mr. President,
Go ahead.
actually, it would be ordinance number 27. I apologize.
All right.
That was the one that I wrote the wrong number down. That one needs to go to the planning commission if it has not done so, which I don't believe it
It
has.
has not.
Okay.
All right, so 26
27.
is fine.
Sorry.
Couldn't figure out why
27.
26.
We will table it for that then.
My mistake.
That's all right, thank you very much. Just wanted to clear all of that up. Mrs. Dickey.
Okay. I would like to ask that ordinance 26 be read for its third and final reading tonight by
Right.
title only.
Madam Clerk, would you please read ordinance number 26 for its third and final reading this evening?
Being an ordinance repealing and removing Chapter 353 of Part 3 of the codified ordinances of the City of Salem regarding parking meters.
All right, is there any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on ordinance number 26 for passage this evening?
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
Mr. Paparottis?
Yes.
Mr. Nestic?
Yes.
All right, that passes with 6 yeas. Number 27 will be tabled so that it can go to the Planning Commission. That concludes the second and third reading of ordinances and resolutions. Move on to introduction of ordinance and resolutions. Mr. Whitehill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend council rules so that Resolution 30 may be considered tonight.
Is there a second on that? Mrs. Dickey. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mr. Nestic?
Yes.
Mr. Paparottis?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend statutory rules so that Resolution 30 may be given its first, second, and third reading this evening.
Is there a second on that? Mrs. Dickey? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
Mr. Paparottis?
Yes.
Mr. Nestic?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Whitehill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the clerk read Resolution 30 by title only for its first, second, and third reading tonight with the emergency clause.
All right, Madam Clerk, would you please read resolution number 30 by title only for its first, second, and third readings this evening with the emergency clause?
Being a resolution to adopt and approve an alternative method of apportionment of local government fund and local government revenue assistant fund monies to be distributed in 2017 and declaring an emergency.
I know we had some questions on that before. Is there any further discussion with regards to this at this time? All right, seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on resolution number 30 for passage this evening?
Mr. Nestic?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
No.
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Paparotis?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
All right, that passes with 5 yeas. Mr. Whitehill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend council rules so that ordinance 31 may be considered this evening.
All right, is there a second on that? Mrs. Dickey? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
Mr. Paparotis?
Yes.
Mr. Nestick?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend statutory rules so that ordinance 31 may be given its first, second, and third reading tonight.
All right, is there a second on that? Mrs. Dickey? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
Mr. Paparotis?
Yes.
Mr. Nestick?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Whitehill?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the clerk read ordinance 31 by title only for its first, second, and third reading tonight, including the emergency clause.
All right, Madam Clerk, would you please read ordinance number 31 by title only for its first, second, and third readings this evening with the emergency clause?
Being an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to advertise for bids and enter into contract for the sale of one used 1995 Ford L8000 dump truck and declaring an emergency.
All right, is there any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll on ordinance number 31 for passage this evening?
Mr. Nestick?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Whitehill?
Yes.
Mr. Gall?
Yes.
Mr. Paparotis?
Yes.
Mrs. Dickey?
Yes.
Passes with 6 yeas. That concludes the introduction of ordinances and resolutions. Move on then to pleasure of council, Mr. Brown.
Thank you very much. I want the people of the second ward to know that I will not be scheduling a meeting for the next month and a half, at least due to personal reasons. And also, I will get with my committee and we'll try to work out a procedure by which we can follow to work better with Mr. Kent's next time. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Whitehill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to take a moment to thank all who were involved in the Franklin housing resolution as far as getting those torn down. The mayor's office, obviously, all the administration, including Dan Rice as well, who was very informative when I made phone calls to ask him about updates, and as well as the mayor. So a lot of work went into it. I'm glad to see him down, and maybe now some memories can fade. As always, I'm going to give a little promotion to the Salem Community Theater. They have a production of The Little Mermaid Junior, which is the 17th, 2 shows on the 18th, and a show on the 19th, which will be coming up. And there is a large cast of a lot of really talented kids. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Gall.
I hope we all took the opportunity to drive through Salem and see how lovely it looks. The effort of the street department is to be commended. They took their day off to help clean up the town for the cruise. The flags are out, 700 flags are out from the Salem Rotary Club itself, plus all those that are very patriotic. And I'd finally like to say thank you very much to the Veterans Council that sponsored Memorial Day. It's a very lovely day, starting with breakfast that was provided by the Zamorelli family, and obviously all those were very, very grateful to start their day off with a full stomach. But as a veteran, I'd like to say thank you to all those that came out along the way and waved and showered the veterans with the support that they're, in my opinion, they're entitled to. And Salem does a good job of that, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Paparotis.
Yes, happy birthday to Betty Brothers. And congratulations to Councilman Whitehill and his wife for their wedding anniversary.
Thank you. Very good. Mrs. Dickey.
First of all, I'd like to welcome Amanda's Candies and Flower Shop as a new business in our downtown, and all the hard work that went into getting them to locate here from what I'm told was Columbiana previously. So really happy to have that addition. I'd also like to congratulate all the area graduates and also all the scholarship recipients and the donors who made those scholarships possible. It is really a great investment in our youth's future. I would like to also say it was nice to get all the good calls and comments about the street paving project and how wonderful it looks so far. It's nice to hear those good things. And also happy birthday to Betty, and also to Rita O'Leary, our former council person.
Thank you. Mr. Nestic.
Thanks. I just want to mention two things. I agree with Mr. Gull's urging to look into the LGF formula, and think it's something that we should follow up on, but, I would have voted with him if we had more time, to do this. I don't know that we got time before it has to pass for this year. And then the other thing is I forgot to mention during my report on the Committee of the Whole, Mr. Gull reminded me that we also spoke about the charter government, took the temperature of all council members on whether they want to move forward with that. It was unanimous, and we're moving forward with putting together what's necessary to get the charter government issue on the ballot.
Very good, thank you.
Good job.
I have a question on that for Mr. Nestic. Who would people call if they're interested in being on that committee to help form the charter government?
Whoever your council representative is, it's probably a good starting point.
Because I did have someone who's interested, and I'm just not sure where to go with it from here.
We're figuring out now exactly everything that has to be done.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I'd like to say that, was it the Memorial Day services, and our own Mr. Gull was the speaker there, and he gave a very good speech. Dealt with him not at all, really. Dealt with the day itself, which was refreshing to see that, and also good rule of speech making. He kept it short, which everybody enjoyed that. Would also again like to echo out that we have the cruise coming this weekend. Always is a good time. I always make sure that I get there. Hope everybody else goes down to that. To be good food, good music, lots of cars. And finally, this past weekend, right out in front of our building here, I took part with the Super Kids Classic, which is the soapbox derby for the handicapped children. And I've been doing this for so many years. I don't know how many it's been. I was involved with it when I was in Columbiana before they moved it to Salem. And I take delight every year in seeing the pleasure and enjoyment that these kids get out of doing this. That a lot of times it may be the only time they have something that they can really look forward to. A lot of people, a lot of effort goes into it. Our own Betty Brothers was line judge with me, and we had some close races that we had to call, but it was a good time, and I look forward to it again next year. With that, that's all I have. Have a good evening. We're adjourned.